The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, Ph.D. We're live here at Children's Health Defense. It's Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026. We have a fantastic show for you today. So in a minute, we're going to be bringing on Kim Mack Rosenberg and Brian Hooker, and we have got a lot to discuss. Then we're going to go to Isabella Yon, and she's going to be interviewing Natalie about how she went from infertility to a home birth. And then we've got Dawn Richardson, very important segment here, America's decline into vaccine mandates. So that is our show today. So let's bring on Brian Hooker and Kim Mack Rosenberg. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Polly.
Well, now we have a lot to discuss this morning. So let's start by putting a few things right. So let's start with our first headline here. The largest egg producers will pay $3.3 million for inflating prices during the bird flu epidemic. I mean, bird flu, that's all we heard a couple of years ago.
Right.
It's all gone very quiet, but now they're going to pay.
They are going to pay because of price inflation and then the whole fear porn aspect of this played in. I mean, they were culling these poultry farms like nobody's business, getting, rid of birds that, could not really transmit the disease to humans. And there were cases of bird flu. There were birds that died. Actually, it was even treatable in birds. Although they recommended, I believe, a type of mRNA vaccine for poultry. For the birds, but it was so insidious. Egg prices went up, and I think that there was a lot of opportunism there, like, oh, there's fear, so we can make some money.
And remember the ostriches in Canada? That
yes,
heartbreaking to watch.
And the thing is, those egg prices too, they went up for the people who can least afford to pay higher grocery prices, right? So I was paying the same price or less for organic pasture-raised eggs than my mother was paying for, whatever the general store brand egg is. And, she's not getting as high quality product.
No, I just have to tell you a little story. I was in Destin and I had to buy eggs. We have our own chickens here. I had to buy some eggs because that's where we were. And I was shocked with these organic eggs. You crack them and they are not as fresh as our eggs here on the farm at all.
Mm-hmm.
And you wonder how long it took from chicken to your house, how long they're just sitting there. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was kind of gross. All right, let's go on to the next article before we spend 20 minutes on eggs. All right, let's put right the World Health Organization. Getting vaccinated saves lives. New data shows that global immunization coverage has moved forward in 2025. 85% or 110 million infants were immunized in 2025, nearly 1 million more than infants the previous year. Let's make sure children don't miss out on living healthy and joyful lives. So we have to put the World Health Organization right, because
absolutely.
They continuously lie.
Well, we have shown, and there have been now, 13 studies that show the health of the unvaccinated, looking at cohorts of unvaccinated children. So we know, this is not true. And these are the studies that the CDC, the FDA, the World Health Organization refused to do. And I think it's really, really myopic, especially when there's so many children in the world that aren't getting good nutrition, they aren't getting clean water, but yet we can throw up this metric, because we can pop them full of vaccines, that are a lot of them in developing countries preserved still with the aerosol, the mercury-containing preservative. It's really an easy out, and the World Health Organization, they need to do a turnabout or they need to go away.
Kim, you have anything to say on the World Health Organization?
I have a lot to say on the World Health Organization. But what this really is it's a marketing scheme in the same way that where we hear the American Academy of Pediatrics, vaccines are safe and effective, and CDC says the same thing. Those are marketing lines. They've never been proven. It's a pat, easy way to sort of sell this idea. And I think, Brian, your point is really well taken, that what would really be helpful is clean water and, better nutrition and better sort of traditional public health measures. Because we know here in the US, we've all seen that chart with diseases, including diseases against which we've never vaccinated. When we had good public health measures starting in, the late 1800s, early 1900s, deaths and incidents from diseases went down dramatically. The same thing could happen in other countries. And it's more effort, it's maybe more money, but I think it's also more sustainable. And I think, we have the record of what those health outcomes can look like.
I'm going to say this, Brian and Kim, I was thinking about this the other day. Is there anything else in the world? I mean, vaccines, I think, are the biggest, have killed more children and maimed more children worldwide than anything else. What else has caused much catastrophic injury and death than vaccination?
Well, when we look at the rate of vaccine injury, the real rate of vaccine injury with the CDC funded Lazarus study, we know that 1 in 38 needle sticks causes a potentially serious adverse event. And then you multiply that by the, over 70 to 80 needle sticks that children in the United States get in a lifetime. So do the math. These vaccines are doing damage to many, many children, and the powers that be would dare not ascertain how much damage is being done because they know the truth.
Yeah, it's whirring around in my mind.
Yes.
From this. All right, let's take up the next article. It's a summit. Now, Brian, tell us about this. You are going to be speaking at this Moving Mountains Together.
This is October 1st through 3rd. The evening of the 1st is a kickoff dinner for the Moving Mountains Together Health Freedom Summit. It is south of Chicago in Illinois. The actual town escapes me, of course, because I'm on air and I forget everything. But there's a great lineup of speakers, especially people like Dr. Larry Palevsky, who's such a great friend. Sorry, thank you for those people in production land, Mokina, Illinois. Larry Palevsky, the conference organizer, Heather Lynn, is also speaking. She's absolutely wonderful. It's going to be a great show. Michelle Spencer, the nurse whistleblower regarding the COVID shot and COVID protocols in a pediatric NICU, and it is just absolutely going to be a great time, great conference. Please come out.
Brian? When is it?
October 1st through 3rd, 2026, Mokina, Illinois.
All right, everyone who can, please be there. All right, let's go to our next headline, please. All right, this is deeply, deeply disturbing. Babies across east of England join diabetes prevention trial. So babies at risk, so I haven't got it, at risk of type 1 diabetes across the east of England are joining an international trial exploring whether vaccination against the SARS-CoV-2 virus could prevent the condition. I don't know how dark and demonic you can get. Somebody help me out with this article.
Go ahead, Kim. Sorry. Yes.
I was going to say it's pretty darn dark, right? Because as you said, Polly, these children don't have the condition. How long are they going to have to follow these children to even see if they would develop the condition? Do they develop the condition as a result of the vaccine?
Right.
I mean, we know about the development of chronic illnesses and autoimmune diseases, et cetera, with vaccines of all different types, and particularly this vaccine. So I think this is, again, it's fear porn. It's, you don't want your child to have diabetes, do you? So let's give them this. but there's no guarantee. This is totally exploratory and experimental.
And we know, Brian, do we not? Type 1 diabetes is one of the biggest adverse events from vaccination, which is basically what Kim was just saying.
Correct. It's an autoimmune response. You're basically developing immunity to your own islet cells in your pancreas. So it's a counterintuitive, and bear in mind that this quote unquote vaccine gene therapy was designed with not a thought of type 1 diabetes in mind. So why would we think, it's really a crapshoot and more of a marketing ploy to get babies to get this particular shot? They're trying to expand their market. Nobody's getting COVID shots anymore, so let's figure out how we can get more people to get COVID shots.
Mm-hmm.
And babies, exactly. They're asking for babies for this trial. Kim, how is that legal that babies could be experimented on?
Well, it's really awful. And I think, it's going to segue into the other topics we have to talk about informed consent. And here, obviously, parents are the ones who have to consent for infants. I say obviously, but, it may not even be obvious to some people. But the fact that this is, there is paperwork that has to be done with any clinical trial, but I've seen informed consent paperwork. I'm sure Brian has seen informed consent paperwork from these trials. Oftentimes, it's abysmal. You don't really know what you're signing up for at all, or you may be even getting false information. I've seen forms that have untrue information in them. So whether you're an infant, a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 20-year-old, or an adult, there are serious questions raised about informed consent in clinical trials, period. But here, again, Polly, they are exploiting parents' fear. As Brian said, no one's taking really these shots anymore. So we have to figure out some way, we have stockpiles of them sitting around. How are we going to get people to use them?
All right, let's go to our next headline, please. And this is a baby died, and Sanofi quietly ended RSV vaccine trial. The company says the death was unrelated to the vaccine. So basically, the baby was going to die anyway. So let's continue. I mean, that's basically what they're saying. Not our problem, wasn't the vaccine.
Exactly. And far be it from them to be the arbiter of why that baby died. They have a strong commercial conflict of interest in order to carry forward their product and other products that are on the market. So of course, the baby died and the baby was going to die. It had nothing to do with the vaccine. They do this all the time. I remember the clinical trial for adolescents and the COVID shot, where Maddie DeGarry was taken off the rolls. She had a serious life-threatening and altering adverse event that is going to, she's going to have to live with forever. But she was not counted in that trial. She was taken out of the trial. So essentially, I think it was like they said she had mild gastritis, but it was a flat-out lie.
And they are giving these parents money to do these trials, right?
They're giving parents, I think in this case, a lot of money. They're giving them almost $4,000. And, that adds a coercive element as well, that folds into, again, the informed consent piece. But you're saying to someone who maybe desperately needs $3,700, that, again, a lot of money. And parents will say, well, we could use that money. What are we going to do? Let's do this. And, maybe we will be helping our child. We don't know. But with clinical trials, so often there are ways that the facts and figures in an individual trial can be manipulated. The trial results overall can be manipulated, but also that trials can just end and disappear, and suddenly that particular arm of a trial just doesn't exist anymore. And it happens in animal studies as well, as they're doing the preclinical trial information. So you don't get the results you like. Somehow you try to make them disappear.
Yeah, horrific. All right, well, look, America is getting ready to go back to school. Not in England. We go back to school in September, but in America, it's kind of Augusty time, right?
Right.
So let's talk about your rights, vaccines. People, even here in Texas, where you can get an exemption, they think you have to get vaccinated because the schools kind of do that, don't they? They say, look, you need all these shots when we don't actually. So let's hear from you, Kim and Brian, on back to school vaccines.
Sure. So I think, again, you were talking a lot about marketing schemes that people are using today, right? We've all seen the billboards, no shots, no school. That is not true. And in the vast majority of states, there are not only medical exemptions, there are religious or philosophical exemptions. We have some states like New York and California, Connecticut, Maine, where religious exemptions no longer are available, though we're fighting the legal fight to try to get those back. Because we believe they're constitutionally protected right. But parents need to know what we're going to have amazing assets on the CHD website talking about back to school. And then also, when you're looking at informed consent, it's not just your right to consent to something, right? There's a right for informed refusal as well. So if you make the decision that you don't want to take a vaccine or any other intervention, you should have the right to refuse that. And, one of the things I've talked about a lot recently over the past couple of months, doctors aren't having those conversations with their families. And I think that families are becoming savvier about wanting to ask those questions and wanting to get those that information. And we've built up a medical system in the US, particularly if doctors are participating in health management organizations, HMOs, any type of managed care organization, where doctors maybe have 8 minutes or 13 minutes with the patient. They're not having those conversations. And it was really telling, Holly, in the AAP's motion for preliminary injunction in their case against the Secretary of Health and Human Services, they put in declarations from doctors who said, if I have to have those conversations with patients, which tells me they're not having those conversations with patients, but if I have to have those conversations, people are going to question vaccines. Oh, and also I won't be able to see as many patients and I won't make as much money. I mean, a lot of this boils down to the money rather than patient's health and patient and family right to informed consent or informed refusal.
Yeah, and Brian, let's just talk for a second about catch up, because we saw Sarah Doe's story. There are people who are not vaccinated or barely vaccinated. They panic with this catch up list that you're sent from the school, and talk about the danger of catch up vaccines.
Well, catch-up vaccine schedules have never been tested for safety. And what that basically means, the catch-up schedule, is that you're cramming a large number of vaccines that may have been missed or, could have been missed earlier, and you're cramming them all in so you can get your child qualified for school attendance because the school district is saying, oh, they must have these particular shots. We've seen so much death, so much disease from catch-up vaccination schedules. Even these sort of seminal vaccines cause autism case, the Hannah Poling case, was because she was on a catch-up schedule. She received a large number of vaccines in a single practitioner visit, and she ended up regressing into autism through a mitochondrial dysfunction. And there have been other catch-up schedules that are examples of catch-up schedules. A 5-year-old boy that received 17 vaccines in a very, very short period of time ended up in the hospital in the ICU. And again, these are not tested. And you are being lied to when somebody coerces you and says, "Oh, you have to have all of these at that particular time." Do not do it.
Right. And Kim, tell us about our toolkit. That a lot of work's gone into the back to school toolkit. How can people get it? And everybody in America who's got a school child should look at this toolkit. It's very thorough.
No, it is very thorough. I am super proud, as I'm sure Brian is, and you are, Polly, of our efforts to put this together and provide parents information on vaccines and on EMR and Wi-Fi. And I'll be on another day to talk about school-based health clinics. So we're really trying to cover the gamut of what parents need to know, and even decisions about what books or curriculum your child can be exposed to and what your rights are as a parent to opt out of some of those issues. Like, do you not want your child? In many states, you as a parent, and most parents don't know this, you have a right to say to your school library, I don't want my child to check out this book. You can be provided a list of the books and identify the books you don't want your child to have. Or if there's a particular curriculum that's being introduced, you can opt out. And there was just a seminal it's really going to become such an important Supreme Court case, Mahmoud v. Taylor, about protecting parental rights and parental religious choice with respect to school curriculum in public schools.
Absolutely. All right. So we're out of time, unfortunately, but we are going to be covering back to school for over the next 2 to 3 weeks on CHD TV. I think the Defender as well. So make sure you're signed up for all of the text alerts, everybody. And the link to the back to school toolkit is in the show notes. So just share that around to all the young parents. And Kim and Brian, thank you so much for being on this morning and educating us as always.
Thanks, Polly.
Thank you, Polly.
All right. We're going to go now to Mothers to Be with Isabella Yon.
Good morning, CHD TV. My name is Bella Yon. Welcome to our Mothers to Be segment where we chat all things preconception, pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. I'm joined today by the fantastic Natalie, who's going to be sharing a little bit about her birth experience and also her fertility journey. So thank you so much for being with us today, Natalie. So excited to chat with you.
Thank you so much for having me.
And congratulations on your beautiful baby boy, who's just a few weeks old, really, still very fresh. So why don't we just start by kicking us off? Why did you decide to have a home birth?
Yeah, I really didn't know much about home birth. I actually thought it was illegal in my state because I know it varies from state to state. I think they just want you to think that, but it's actually completely legal. And I wanted to birth at home because the hospital is not very women-centered. It's all kind of like making decisions on insurance. And I just, didn't want to have the interventions that can come out of the hospital. I wanted to be in the comfort of my own home. And yeah, that's pretty much also my age. I was 39 when we conceived. So I knew that they would, treat me differently. I don't know if they're still using the word geriatric, but yeah, I would have been put in a high risk category, and I knew my health was kind of in tip-top shape. So I didn't want to be treated differently.
Yeah, I love that. And so you decided to go for a home birth. Amazing choice. How did you go about finding a midwife, or, who did you use? Did you use a midwife, doula, both? And how did you go about finding those practitioners in your area?
Yeah, no, that's a great question because I think a lot of women don't know how to navigate that. I just started talking to a lot of people, and basically I used Facebook. There are home birthing communities based off of your state, and I think they are like an invite only because they don't want just anyone on there. But basically, that's how I found my midwife. I didn't want really a nurse midwife because they can have a lot more interventions. So we went with, a certified professional midwife. The care, we had prenatals scheduled, and I just was kind of taken aback by how much care and how much they monitor you and, want to make sure that you're set up for a healthy delivery. Because, something that can come up is like preeclampsia, which I was kind of always worried about, and taking my blood pressure at home daily. But so much research and training goes into their profession. I was just blown away.
Yeah.
So I know you guys had featured someone on your show, and she thought that there was no midwives in this area, but they definitely are out there. Facebook.
Amazing. Amazing. Good to know. Yeah, I utilize Facebook too to connect with other natural mamas and resources. So that's
Yeah.
amazing. And I think you're so right on the level of care. I also was blown away. And even just how I'm sure your midwife appointments were the same, but they're so thorough. Each one is like an
Yes.
hour long that you
Yep.
can ask absolutely any questions. They're so supportive and encouraging. I mean, my midwives would go through like what I had eaten that day and
Yeah.
how's your hydration and
Yep.
all how's your stress level, everything
Yep.
to get a really full picture of how I'm doing in pregnancy. So that's awesome.
Yeah, and very solution oriented. Like she had a solution for like everything. Like if I had leg cramps, it was like, okay, up your magnesium.
Yeah.
And, like let's look for the natural kind of methods to treat whatever your ailments are, which I just loved.
Yeah, I love it too. I love it too. So let's chat about your birth. How many weeks were you? Maybe just run us through top to
Sure.
bottom, whole story. How'd it go?
Yeah. The pregnancy was overall pretty good. I would say, in the beginning, I had a lot of morning sickness for the first 3 months. But other than that, the pregnancy was really well. And then the birth, he's asleep right now. It's so precious. He was a day early. So that was another thing with the hospital. They're so obsessed with this whole 40 weeks, like can't go a day over, can't go a week over. And that was one of my main concerns with the midwife. I was like, will you let me go over 40 weeks? And, of course she would. So he was a day early. The labor was actually about 21 hours. In some of the photos, you'll see the hip squeezes are kind of what got me through the pain. Yeah, that was actually the midwife in training, and she started those hip squeezes, and every contraction I had to have someone, either my husband or one of the midwives, do a hip squeeze, and they were a lifesaver. And then, it was really awesome. Like I got to eat what I wanted to eat, but I wasn't that hungry. And then the labor just, we kind of moved around the house to where I was most comfortable. We did have a birth pool set up in one of our rooms, and I did get in it a few times, and it actually relaxed me too much. My contractions slowed down when I would get in there. And so we decided, I did always imagine like I would give birth in the pool, but I decided to go into this one room in our house. It has a big giant window, but we of course covered, the curtains. But I just felt most comfortable in there, and I was standing and utilizing gravity, and the birth of him was actually quite easy, in my opinion. I mean, it was painful. There was about 30 minutes of pushing, and he came out, head first, and then the rest of his body. And it was beautiful. So his dad got to catch him.
Aww.
And then because we didn't do any ultrasounds, we had no idea if he was a boy or a girl. And then his dad was like, it's a boy. And I just started crying because everyone had thought he was a girl based off of just kind of some miscellaneous, like position of my stomach. And,
Yeah.
but we were so happy to have a healthy boy. And, so the one complication that happened, it wasn't actually with him, but so after he came out, there was a fair amount of blood that came out with him. And so the midwives had me go to the couch and kind of lay down. And I actually just learned what this is called. It's called retained placenta, where my placenta would just not come out, and it took about an hour. So the midwives were monitoring that. And, at one point when it got closer to that hour and I was still bleeding, they were kind of like, Natalie, if this doesn't come out, you're going to have to go to the hospital. And I'm like, what are they going to do for me there, was my first question. And she's like, likely they'll have to, physically remove it from you. So that thought just kind of terrified me. And so she's like, I can give you a shot of Pitocin to help with the contraction. And I don't like shots. I don't like drugs, but I was like, if that's going to keep me out of the hospital, sure, let's do it. So thankfully it did come out pretty shortly after she said hospital. I don't know if it was like my mind of like, okay, this has to come
Let's
out.
get it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you. And I know we chatted about this before the show, but you mentioned that your midwife was just incredibly calm throughout, this complication. And I can attest to that too. Just a midwife's presence they're so incredible. And any midwives watching, you're amazing. Just
worth their weight in gold. I say.
Seriously. So I think that just also goes to show, like, finding the importance of a midwife you really jive with, but also just someone who knows their stuff. And it sounds, Natalie, like you found someone so amazing. So I'm so glad
definitely
that all worked out. What a beautiful birth. And how was your postpartum? Let's chat about the few days and stuff, weeks after birth. How was it?
Yes, and I know you just had a segment on postpartum, which I really, really appreciate, because for me, that's actually been the hardest. I kind of did all my research on like the labor and, what we weren't going to be giving him as far as, injections and all of that. So I didn't really put a lot of research into postpartum, and it kind of came at me hard, especially with the breastfeeding. So I would definitely, if I could go back, I would have gotten a lactation consultant, I think, earlier.
Yeah.
But basically he had a tongue and lip tie that was not causing a good latch. So we did, long story short, we got the tongue and lip tie corrected. He had to go to a dentist at like 2 weeks old, but he is on formula now. I am doing the Weston A. Price homemade formula. Yeah, so breastfeeding, I plan to, breastfeed until as long as I could, but that just wasn't in the cards for us. And I would say tips for postpartum. I have my weekly walk. We have a lake here, Lake Junaluska, that I walk. It's about 2 miles, and that is just like my savings grace to be outside. He loves it. Really have your place, and if it can be outside, for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think gentle movement postpartum with your baby. I was even thinking that this morning, earlier this morning, I was like, it's hard to work out, with a tiny baby who needs you and needs to be on you, but a walk outside, they're usually calm. They can look at the trees and chill, and it's such great exercise, but also mindfulness for us mothers. So I love that tip. I know we're running out of time, but I did want to chat also about fertility and preconception. So let's chat about that journey for you. Did you guys have any issues with conceiving initially?
Yes, we did. So we decided that we wanted to have a baby. I was kind of later in life, about 35. So it did take us 4 years essentially to conceive him. And I had tried all the natural routes, acupuncture. I did some experimental stuff with like methylene blue. And basically, it was a segment on CHD. It was a chiropractor that you guys had I don't remember his name, but he's based in Florida. I was even considering maybe flying down there to see him. But I reached out to a friend, and he got me in touch with his chiropractor, who's actually an applied kinesiologist.
Okay.
So I don't know if people are familiar with that is, but it's essentially muscle testing. And so basically went to him. Within the first visit, he identified that, so we had 3 miscarriages in about 2 years. So he had identified that that was actually my thyroid was underperforming, and immediately put me on a liquid iodine. And he was putting me on about 6 milligrams, which is like pretty high. If you consider what, the RDA is, it's like micrograms, which, there's 1,000 micrograms in a milligram. So this is like, very controversial, but I immediately noticed, basically, I didn't know I was hypothyroid until I got better. And so I actually kind of went down a rabbit hole and found Dr. Brownstein, which you guys have had on your program. Yeah. Do you know of him?
Yes, I actually also have very similar story, in the sense that between my first and second, I also experienced a miscarriage, had no idea I had Hashimoto, so autoimmune thyroid problems, and also got in contact with Dr. Brownstein and his amazing work, and now have 2 other babies. So
he's my absolute favorite. Like,
he's amazing.
Yeah, because
so I'm guessing it helped.
I mean, I believe so because, I have the blood work to follow suit with that.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. My husband was like, please go, to an OBGYN and just get some like blood work. And all my hormones were normal except the TSH. So when I got that, I think it was at like a 4.7, which, depending on the test. So basically, I did have one panel of blood work when I was pregnant with my son, and the iodine had brought my TSH to basically where it needs to be in pregnancy, which was under 2. So that was pretty amazing to see that progress.
Yeah, what an amazing story. Because also, I think conventional medicine is so quick to put a label on it, oh, it's age, or oh, you just don't have, your hormones aren't balanced, even though your labs are fine, just very blanket statements, when actually when you dig a little deeper and work with some more functional medicine practitioners, you can really find that root cause, and address it and fix it.
100%. Yeah. I mean, it's so beautiful to just be able to treat something naturally, and like all my symptoms, the brain fog, the cold feet, even my voice changed. It became less hoarse. It's wild. And I attribute that all to the thyroid healing. And then of course, now we have a baby to.
Oh, I'm so happy for you guys.
It's so funny. My husband, he teases me. He's like, because I call him our iodine baby. And he was born in February, and that's essentially the color of iodine as well.
I love it. I love it. It's perfect. Well, congratulations, and what a beautiful story, and just so encouraging, hopefully for you mamas watching, not only a beautiful birth, and even, as complications can arise, just the calmness and ability to get through those, and then also, what an inspiring fertility story. So thank you so much for coming on and chatting with us today.
Thank you for letting me tell my story. I mean, that's such an honor in itself. So
absolutely. We do always end our segment, not to put you on the spot, but I think you've had so much wisdom here, with one question, and that is, if you have one piece of advice for a new mama or an expecting mama or someone just starting their fertility journey, what would it be?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much that we discussed already. So, and I do watch all the shows, especially the bus stories. And I feel like people are like, do your research, but I'm going to take it a step further and say, just don't vaccinate your child.
I love it.
As a new mom, like learning all the like little things about a baby, I cannot imagine putting a foreign substance in something so small and then wondering what is normal and what's,
Yeah.
what's not. So yeah, read the vaccine inserts, and I think that would be enough to convince anyone to not
Totally agree.
inject their baby.
I love it. Say it how it is. So good. Natalie, thank you so much for being here. So lovely to chat with you.
Yes, thank you so much, Bella.
And thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Welcome to Advocacy Lifeline. You're live here on CHG TV. Thank you for joining us today. The purpose of this show is to help empower you, our viewers, to use your voice to affect change in law, policy, and public opinion through education and action for issues that are important to you and your family. This is not medical or legal advice, so please don't take it that way. These are my opinions alone and not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense or the National Vaccine Information Center, where I work full-time as the Director of Advocacy. Today, we are going to talk about the history behind how in America we got here to the place we are now with vaccine mandates. We didn't get here overnight. It happened through a steady decline of rights over the last 230 years of America's 250-year incredible history. Vaccine mandates are, in fact, un-American. We need to work to defend our freedoms by repealing current and prohibiting future vaccine mandates. Vaccines, just like all pharmaceutical products, have the capability to cause someone to be injured or killed. Vaccine manufacturers and those who administer vaccines are protected from civil liability for the harm they cause from within federal law. That's where they did these protections. And nobody else should be making the decision for you of what medical products you want to use for you or your children. That's not informed consent, and it does not belong anywhere in this country. How did we get here, and what can we do about it? I would like to lead off today's show by sharing a recent clip of a July 4th commentary entitled Americans Defending Liberty for 250 Years by Barbara Loe Fisher, president and co-founder of the National Vaccine Information Center, where Barbara, she eloquently and succinctly shows that freedom does not mean being compelled to offer up our bodies or the bodies of our children for genetic manipulation and biological alteration in service to the majority in control in the state.
Liberty, the state of being free. Freedom, the power to determine action without confinement or physical restraint. Autonomy, the state of being independent and self-directing. On July 4, 2026, the American people celebrate 250 years of liberty. Our natural right to liberty was defined in the Declaration of Independence, signed on July 4, 1776, by the founders of the United States of America. That document and the U.S. Constitution containing the First Amendment Bill of Rights, ratified 15 years later, established the USA as a constitutional republic, not a democracy. In a democracy, citizens are subject to the absolute rule of the majority. But in our representative constitutional republic, citizens are guaranteed the exercise of inalienable natural rights, which limit the power of the state and protect minorities from being used and abused by the majority. Our constitutional republic was designed to protect the autonomy and liberty of individuals, whether they belong to the majority or a minority. But today, when it comes to laws requiring citizens to consume biological products that can cause injury and death, that is not how it's working. Today, the majority in power in federal and state governments have imposed their will on individuals who object to being coerced and compelled to inject, swallow, or inhale commercial biological products containing lab-altered viruses and bacteria, chemicals, metals, aborted fetal cells, animal and human DNA, and messenger RNA coated in lipid nanoparticles as the price of getting an education, accessing healthcare, holding a job, or otherwise fully functioning in society. Our liberty is being taken away, one mandated pharmaceutical product at a time. As we celebrate America's 250th birthday and count the blessings of living in a constitutional republic founded on the principle of liberty for all, it is a time to reflect upon what it means to be free. Certainly, freedom does not mean being compelled to offer up our bodies or the bodies of our children for genetic manipulation and biological alteration in service to the majority in control of the state. Freedom does not mean being forced to take the knee and worship at the feet of medical doctors and scientists in government, medical trade, and industry who believe they should have the authority to not only define what is true, but also to define what is good, and who refuse to acknowledge the God-given right of the people to use reason and exercise conscience and religious beliefs when making life and death decisions about medical risk-taking. Freedom does not mean allowing government officials and their corporate business partners to censor the speech and punish those who disagree with them about public health laws that coerce and sanction people refusing to have their bodies corrupted by biological products that can injure and kill. As children growing up in America, the concept of the right to liberty has always been foundational to understanding our country's history. So how did we as a country, which was founded on protection of individual liberty, ever agree to give up autonomy and the right to protect our body from harm as the price for being allowed to function in society?
And that's the question. How did we, as a freedom-loving and freedom-protecting nation, become the leading nation in the world, having the most vaccines on the recommended federal schedule, many of which ultimately translate into state mandates? Well, it all started 230 years ago in 1796, when our country was only 20 years old, when Edward Jenner developed the smallpox vaccine using cowpox. In 1809, Massachusetts became the first state to pass a law authorizing mandatory smallpox vaccination, allowing local boards of health to require it. This marks the beginning of government vaccine mandates in America. In 1855, Massachusetts struck again and became the first state to require smallpox vaccination for school attendance. Other states and cities followed over the next several decades. New York City followed in 1862, Connecticut in 1872, and Pennsylvania in 1895. Interestingly enough, though, overseas, Britain, in response to demonstrations and objections from the people over government-forced vaccination, walked back on their mandatory smallpox vaccines and added a conscientious objector clause in 1898. This clause gave rise to the term conscientious objector, which later referred to those who opposed military service. By the end of 1898, magistrates had issued more than 200,000 vaccine exemptions in Britain. This continued dissension into vaccine mandates in the U.S. was led by medical doctors collaborating with chemical companies and the new public health profession who were cleaning up unsanitary conditions in crowded cities. That was good. But they also worked to convince lawmakers to legally require both the young and old Americans to scratch the dirty, notoriously reactive live smallpox virus vaccine into their arms, teeming with cow and horse pox pus and provoking inflammatory responses during a smallpox-like infection that could unpredictably spiral out of control. The smallpox vaccine was especially feared by mothers and fathers who watched too many children lose their health and lives after getting it. Barbara said later in that same commentary commemorating our nation's 250th birthday that the medical doctors who aggressively pushed the smallpox vaccine on healthy people and the chemical companies profiting from selling that crude and disgusting brew and government officials enthusiastically demanding that everyone accept it all used vaccination as a community organizing and behavior control tool to place restrictions on individual liberty, driven by ideology and completely ignoring the side effects of the smallpox vaccine. They justified violating an individual's natural right to autonomy by invoking the theoretical need to restrict the liberty of unvaccinated people in order to, quote unquote, protect the safety, happiness, prosperity, and security of the state. So moving forward in our timeline, in the landmark 1905 court case Jacobson versus Massachusetts, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld the state's authority to enforce a compulsory smallpox vaccination law under its police powers. This is the cornerstone case that most mandates, in a flawed fashion, rest their justification on. Still from the smallpox era, this came out of an outbreak in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Now, remember, the law had already passed in Massachusetts allowing local boards of health to require the smallpox vaccine. Henning Jacobson was a Lutheran pastor and he refused to get the smallpox vaccine, so he was fined $5. He argued the requirement violated his liberty under the 14th Amendment, and therefore he shouldn't have to pay the penalty. The Supreme Court upheld the law by a vote of 7-2. Note that this had nothing to do with school vaccine mandates at all, and the pastor, he wasn't held down and forcibly vaccinated. He was never required to be vaccinated. This is not what this case was about. The penalty for him not complying with the mandate was only a $5 fine, and that was the issue before the court. There was not any other type of exclusion from society or loss of employment or any other penalty. Now, I want to pause for a second and point out here that it's important for people to understand that just as states currently have the right to mandate vaccines, states also have the right to prohibit and repeal vaccine mandates. The Constitution in the 10th Amendment clearly states that powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. Court cases give interpretation of current law. We all have to remember that law is moldable and changeable through the actions of legislators duly elected by the people who represent them. It is the right of any state to reverse their decision on vaccine mandates by passing laws to do just that. So now moving forward into 1922, in the court case of Zook versus King, the Supreme Court upheld a city's power to require vaccination as a condition of school attendance. Ordinances in the city of San Antonio, Texas stated that nobody could attend a public school without first presenting a certificate of vaccination. Public officials excluded Rosalind Zook from public school because she did not have the required certificate and refused to submit to vaccination. She sued, but the ruling affirmed that states can constitutionally impose public health requirements if they choose to do so. What happened next shifted everything. The school vaccine mandate system spread across the country, and from the 1960s to the 1980s, states expanded school vaccine laws to cover polio, measles, and many other childhood vaccines. By 1963, just under half the states had school vaccine mandate laws. Polio vaccines were then available, and this fueled those mandates. In 1963, the measles vaccine was licensed, and the CDC launched a measles vaccine campaign that ended up fueling the next wave of vaccine mandates. By the early 1980s, all 50 states had school vaccine mandates in place. So just think about that for a second. The 1980s, that wasn't all that long ago compared to our entire history of the United States. People think that we've had massive school mandates for a lot longer than that, and we have not. It hasn't been all that long. Now, with these mandates, all 50 states had medical vaccine exemptions in place. The Christian Scientists lobbying helped get states that did not already have religious exemptions to add them to help insulate the mandates from First Amendment challenges. For decades, all states except Mississippi and West Virginia had religious exemptions. Now there are 46 states that have religious exemptions. Even some states like California had philosophical or personal belief exemptions. California's personal belief exemption was established in the early 1960s. The number of states having personal belief, philosophical, or conscientious exemptions was as high as 18 states. But today, there are 15 states that have these conscientious and personal belief exemptions in state law. Next, we get to the era of altering vaccine exemptions. I'm going to insert myself and my good friend and colleague Rebecca Rex into this timeline. We worked actively for 7 years talking to legislators and mobilizing grassroots to add a reasons of conscience exemption to statewide vaccine mandates for children in the state of Texas. We had bills filed and one passed committee in earlier sessions. We finally succeeded in 2003, and Texas was the first state to add a conscientious exemption after the implementation of broad childhood vaccine mandates. Now, just going a few years later, in 2006, Gardasil, the HPV vaccine, was licensed, and the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices added it to the recommended schedule for 11-year-old girls. Next, there was a frenzy of states, a feeding frenzy fueled by medical trade lobbyists and pharmaceutical companies trying to add HPV vaccines to mandatory vaccine schedules across the country. Now, Michigan was the first state in 2006 that tried to mandate HPV vaccines. Senate Bill 1416 passed the Senate 36-1, but the outrage and opposition voiced by parents, they showed up strong, and then the bill died in the House. In 2007, 24 states filed bills for HPV vaccine mandates, even though the vaccine didn't make any sense from a safety, necessity, effectiveness, or cost standpoint. Merck's fingerprints, the company that manufactured the Gardasil vaccine, their fingerprints were left everywhere as the primary driver. We even joked that HPV stood for Help Pay for Vioxx, because lawsuits all over the deaths caused by their drug were seriously costing Merck so much money. And in February of 2007, Texas Governor Rick Perry issued an executive order to mandate it. Rebecca and I leaned into the networks of grassroots we had already built to quickly get the legislative support to overturn the governor's executive order, and the HPV vaccine mandate was stopped. So that was a huge shift and a slap to Merck. In March of 2007, the New Mexico legislature actually passed an HPV vaccine mandate bill, but fortunately, Governor Richardson vetoed it. That's he's not related to me, but that's twice in 2 months that Merck got a slap from a Richardson, so that's pretty good. Okay, one by one, each of the other mandate bills fell like a string of dominoes. In the 2008 and 2009 time period, only Virginia and the District of Columbia passed mandates, but they had such very broad exemptions, so basically anybody could say no to them. So now medical trade and pharma lobbyists shifted their efforts by a new strategy. We were becoming very effective in state legislatures to stop these mandates. So what they did was they started pushing adding vaccine mandates by administrative rule through agencies instead of through bills in the legislature. Rhode Island in 2015 had a large expansion of mandates, including HPV vaccine mandates for boys as well as girls. all accomplished through a Department of Health rule. So this was all done by bureaucrats. No elected legislator had any say in this. Hawaii did the same thing in 2019 by rule for all seventh graders. Numerous states shifted their efforts to mandates by rulemaking because, in my opinion, national grassroots efforts in the states, by and large, prevented new mandates from being added in state legislatures. Pharma and medical trade, whose profits depended on expanding mandates, entrenched and came up with a new strategy. Bring back the hysteria and fear of measles, so successful at expanding vaccine mandates back in the 1960s. They used this to start attacking vaccine exemptions. And in May of 2015, Vermont was the first state to pass a bill to roll back exemptions. H.98 eliminated the philosophical exemption effective July 1st, 2016. Fortunately, the state still had religious exemptions, but things really took a turn in June of 2015. California became the next state to successfully pass legislation to remove exemptions. Senate Bill 277, authored by Senator Richard Pan, removed the personal belief exemption. California never had a standalone religious exemption, so this loss of all exemptions except medical was devastating. This whole effort rode the wave of the hyped up fear over a measles outbreak in Disneyland. Still exploiting irrational measles fears being pushed by public health employees, in 2019, the Washington legislature removed the philosophical exemption for measles only, for the measles vaccine mandate only, but left the exemption in place for all the other vaccines. Fortunately, there was still and still remains a religious exemption for the measles vaccine mandate in Washington. Also in 2019, the Maine legislature repealed both its religious and philosophical exemptions through LD 798. It took effect September 1st, 2021. Certain previously held exemptions were grandfathered, but this really hurt families as they had older children who were in school who still had their exemptions, and younger children that didn't have an exemption yet no longer had their exemption in place, and it really hurt families. Also in 2019, the New York legislature repealed its religious exemption. They did this in one day. It was awful. They had the committee hearings, the vote, the crossover in the chamber, the committee hearing, the vote, and it went to the governor and was signed all in one day. And they did it where it took effect immediately with no grandfather clause. This effectively pulled out the rug from so many families in New York, causing many to have to move to other states, including Connecticut. And so now for those families who had left New York for Connecticut, they were messed up one more time. So this final reduction in vaccine exemptions occurred in Connecticut in 2021, where the legislature removed the religious exemption, leaving only a medical exemption. Students already enrolled with an exemption on file were grandfathered, like in Maine, but all other students had to comply beginning September 1st, 2022. And finally, the stoppage of this carnage on the exemptions. In 2023, Mississippi added a religious exemption through a court directive. In Borsarge versus Edney, the U.S. District Judge Sewell Osreden of the Southern District of Mississippi ruled from the bench on April 17, 2023, that Mississippi must offer a religious exemption to its school vaccination requirement under the First Amendment. The lawsuit was filed in September of 2022 by 7 parents, funded by the Informed Consent Action Network, against State Health Officer Dr. Daniel Edney and Attorney General Lynn Fitch. The judge gave the Mississippi State Health Department of Health until July 15, 2023 to create the process, and the health department began accepting requests on that date using Form 139R, which people had to file at their county health department with a vaccine education video required. Under the process, state officials cannot question the sincerity of a person's religious beliefs, and this moved Mississippi from medical-only exemptions to allowing religious exemptions after more than 40 years of not having them. So that kind of wraps up that period in history of the changes to the vaccine exemptions. But overlapping these last changes to vaccine exemptions, next came COVID. And in 2021, we saw the Biden administration issue executive orders directing federal agencies to issue regulations for various employer-based COVID-19 vaccine mandates and military vaccine mandates. Hospitals and many other employers, including government contractors, categorically denied religious exemptions that people thought that they had the right to. Many who refused to comply with the mandates lost their jobs and careers and could no longer provide for their families. Many who succumbed to the mandates suffered vaccine injuries, and tens of thousands of people died from vaccine reactions. Between court cases and the declaration of emergency revoked, most, if not all, federally initiated COVID-19 vaccine mandates were terminated by 2023. Now, one positive thing to come out of all of this is that many people who had never questioned the safety, efficacy, or necessity of vaccines began to do so. Everybody knows someone hurt or killed by COVID-19 vaccine. Laws were passed in more than half the states prohibiting COVID-19 vaccine mandates or COVID-19 vaccine status discrimination. Real pushback happened, preventing vaccine passports, thanks to the efforts of people contacting their legislators with their concerns and forward-thinking legislators mounting opposition. Not a single COVID-19 vaccine mandate was passed in any state for school children. So where do we go from here? The only sensible place to go is to repeal and prohibit all vaccine mandates and vaccine status discrimination. Vaccine exemptions are not the answer either. Removing mandates is the answer. Exemptions to vaccine mandates are an illusion because they amount to an approval and validation of oppressive vaccine mandates. Then we have to go and beg for the legal right to decline to take a product that can injure, kill us, or fail to prevent infection, so we can go to school, receive health care, get a job, or otherwise function in society. This is not informed consent. Existing exemptions aren't even a guarantee. In July of 2025, the American Academy of Pediatrics called on state legislatures to eliminate all religious, conscientious, and personal belief exemptions and to restrict pediatrician approval of medical exemptions. Medical vaccine exemptions are already largely inaccessible because most doctors won't even write them because of pressure within their industry. Vaccine mandates violate the ethical principle of informed consent and deny right to life, which is an unalienable natural right. As acknowledged in the U.S. Declaration of Independence, natural rights are given to us by God. Human rights are recognized by governments. Vaccine mandates take away our natural right to freedom of thought and conscience. These rights are embodied in the natural right to life and autonomy. The right to autonomy is the foundation for the universally recognized human right to informed consent to medical risk-taking. We have to learn from our U.S. history on how we got to this point of vaccine mandates. We're starting to reverse the course, but there will be, as history has shown, pushback. But we have to fight. What's coming would be just absolutely horrible if we're not successful at stopping this. And we know we're going to see another crisis, another outbreak, another set of media frenzied articles pumping up fear for something else. It's this push and shove back and forth through the history, but there are these mandates in place and we do have to work to stop them. In closing, please talk to your legislators about how vaccine mandates are un-American. It's time to remove them from state laws and regulations. Please share this episode with others. Anybody can share these ideas with their state legislators so they can file bills in their state to put some of these protections in effect in their state. On the CHD website, go under shows, pick Advocacy Lifeline, and copy the link and share it. Go ahead and please sign up for the NVIC Advocacy Portal at nvicadvocacy.org and commit to following what's going on in your state and taking the steps to help pass bills to get rid of mandates, get rid of repeal the mandates, prohibit them, and get rid of vaccine status discrimination and make it illegal. So make your voice heard. Please get involved. A lot is at stake here, as we've seen in the history shown today. Please consider making donations to CHD and NVIC so we can keep up this important work of giving you information you can't really get anywhere else. I want to give a special thanks to all listeners of our show. I am thankful for each and every one of you. We will be back here in 2 weeks from today on Wednesday morning, August 5th at 10:30 a.m. at Eastern Time, 9:30 Central Time, 7:30 a.m. Pacific Time. God bless you all. God bless America, and we'll see you next time.
So, can you tell us who you are?
I'm Annie Whitney.
Annie Whitney.
Yes.
All right, let's go. I'll guide you through this, okay? Let's go back to when you were pregnant with your daughter.
Mm.
Did you have any vaccines while you were pregnant?
I did. I had the flu shot, I had swine flu shot, and I had the DTaP.
And why did you have those? Were you put under pressure?
My OB said that they were necessary, and when I asked questions, they said it was so dangerous not to have the vaccines. And I questioned the swine flu vaccine in particular, and they said, oh, no, you have to have it, because if you get the swine flu, then, you'll lose the baby. And I'd had a history of miscarriages, and so that was enough for me to get it, yeah.
All right, and so your daughter's born, and how is she? Describe her to us.
She was healthy, beautiful. I mean, she had a full head of black hair, blue eyes. She was like a little doll. Perfectly healthy. And smart, really smart. I knew that I was in for it with her, just like with her brother, that she was going to be spirited and fast and keep me on my toes.
So you did everything you were told as far as vaccines?
Right, she had every single vaccine on time, every time, and her 6-month vaccines, and then she died of SIDS.
So she had you don't remember exactly.
But it would have been within 2 weeks, because she was on time and she was 6.5 months old when she died.
And people listening to this, when we speak to people whose children have passed after vaccines, it's like your body goes into shock, and you can't actually remember all those things.
No, and it was horrible. It was, she woke up, I left her just to take the trash out, and then settled her back to sleep, and took the trash out and came back, and she was arched back and not breathing, and she was actually at my last infant CPR class, so I was very up to date on my infant CPR. My husband was up to date on his CPR, because I have a school, and so I need to stay current, and so it was so I came back, she wasn't breathing, I started CPR, I called for my husband, he came and continued, I called 911, and they were reassuring, because they were giving us all of the steps, and we were doing the steps, and then when the first responders came, the first person I saw was someone I'd grown up with and gone to, one of my best friends growing up, and is a firefighter, and he came running down the driveway, and I thought, oh, good, he'll make sure that she's fine, and so they came in and couldn't get her breathing, and got her in the ambulance, and we weren't able to be in the ambulance with her, and so we followed the ambulance to the hospital, and they couldn't get her breathing, and when I heard them call for the second EpiPen, I knew that she wasn't going to respond, and so they stopped working on her, and I took all the things off of her body, all of the, I don't know, IV things. And wrapped her up. And my husband and son were there. And then our family came because we let them know when we were on our way. And we were able to sit with her for a while and say goodbye, but then we had to walk out the door. And leave her there. And I was breastfeeding her, so I was full, and I didn't have a baby to eat.
And remind me of her name again.
Andy.
Annie. Okay, and we're going to put a picture of Annie up on the wall here.
Thank you.
Everybody's just, there's so much love and sorrow. Everyone's so sorry that this happened to a beautiful girl. Can't even imagine. Everyone with their injured children is just, that's when we look at our children, we think, well, they made it, that they're alive.
Right. I think, it's so hard to, no injury is better or worse than any other. They're all horrible. I look at my godson who is, now having, from the same shot from the ETAP, having seizures, and his body can't process out heavy metals anymore, so he has to have special food and special water, and he's damaged, and he was fine before.
This is what we're saying.
And he's damaged, and he is doing well-ish, but he's not healthy. He's not that same child. And he has to now live with being a sick child because of the DTaP. And so I watch the family walking through that too, and I have a school, and so I see children who are vaccine injured. And
so let me just say again, so you work in a school,
yeah.
And here in California, and
Yes.
you see the children coming in that are vaccine injured.
Oh yeah, for years. Yeah, I've had, and since vax came out, I've talked to some of the old families, and one in particular, a girl who's severely autistic, and ran into her dad, and we were talking about vax because it was right when the movie had come to Santa Barbara, and I said, so have you guys, looked into that for your child? And he said, oh yeah, absolutely, that was what did it.
Absolutely what?
That was what did it, the vaccines.
The vaccine.
Yeah, and this child, again, gorgeous child. So sweet. And when I worked with her, I could see, it's really hard to get that connect with a child who's diagnosed with autism, really hard to get that, to a place where they're actually referencing you, right? And when she would, it was always like this sideways. She would look at me sideways, and I could connect with her, and I could see her, and she would hear me. And I just think about how much she had to process through in order to connect. And she was fine prior to. She was a healthy girl. And same, we had a child who had severe seizure disorder, and he was affected at his 4-month shots, and he seized every day, multiple times a day, and he's now, I want to say he's 6 now. I'm still in contact with him, and he's gone through so many different therapies and medications, and and he was fine before. He was fine. He was a healthy, normally developing child, and now he's really, really damaged. And those are, the more intense, I guess, injuries, but there are the little ones too. We've got children who are just on the spectrum, right? And but who are functional, but they're definitely on the spectrum, and they play, don't like playing with other children, and do the, lining up all of the cars and having these projects that they work on and not connecting, and we work on emotional development with the children, and they can't get it, you know. And again, fine beforehand. And because it's a preschool, I see them going through the process. So when I get them there, you know, somewhere like between 2 months and 2 years old, they'll start coming. And so I see them before and after each visit. Well baby, it's sickening that they call them well baby checks.
My Periscope peeps call them hell baby checks.
Yeah.
Listen, everybody is so grateful for you sharing that painful story, and they love you so much. And are you a Periscope peep?
No, I'm not on Periscope.
We're going to make you one.
Okay.
You've got to have a whole new family.
I just joined Twitter.
Okay, then
So
that's
we'll
good,
see.
and it will help you get on Periscope peep. But just thank you for sharing a story.
Thank you.
And like I say, there's a lot of love on here, so, and I'm sure when we are back, so you've got love coming across there. This is our, how old are you? 12. Our 12-year-old helper. Thank you so much for helping us. All right, we're going to come off social media and come back.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.